All right, welcome everyone to our January 23rd panel on how to study for MCAT, all the tips and tricks and how to succeed on that big exam before you go on to the application phase. This is one of our amendments from Monday panels. Really excited to have all of you here and then have an awesome bunch of panelists who can share their expertise with you. So I think maybe we can just start with some quick introductions. We'll do it maybe popcorn style. We also have a duo. And then just maybe a quick intro on your name, maybe undergrad institution, major, city grew up, any relevant details you think there. Also, if you took the MCAT like once, twice, any of those type of details too. So maybe Cyan, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Cyan. I'm actually kind of distant from this process. I'm coming back from my LOA to start my fourth year of med school. So, but I mean, it's all pretty much the same going from MCAT, USMLE, step two. When you come to the actual testing process. So hopefully I can give some tips there. But yeah, I spent most of my life in Georgia, went to GT, did some gap years. So that might become relevant when we talk about the timeline for when maybe you should take the test. And then, yeah, so now I'm pretty comfortable here in California. I'm going into my fourth year. So yeah, I'm happy to share some tips and thoughts about the testing process.
Great, thank you. How about our duo?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen. I use she, her pronouns. I grew up in Singapore in upstate New York, and I went to Stanford for undergrad, took one gap year, and I took my MCAT once, which like the newer version, but I also took the shortened version during COVID, and I did it the summer right before my senior year. And yeah, and I'm a first year med student, and so is Eugene.
Yay. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Eugene. I was born in Korea, but I kind of grew up like around the DMV area. So any East Coasters out there. So I went to Johns Hopkins for undergrad. I studied biomedical engineering and I did 1 year gap year. And during my gap year, I worked as like in a medical device company. And for my MCAT, I took it 2 times actually. So it was during COVID. So the first one was the shortened one, and then the second one was the longer one, which like happened like I guess like after the peak of COVID. So if you guys have any questions about like taking MCAT multiple times and like taking 2 different formats, I guess, yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks. I'll popcorn it off to Ben.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ben. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also an M1. I also went to Johns Hopkins. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. And then I went to Baltimore for college, and then I moved to DC afterwards. And I took 1 gap year, I spent about half the time bartending. I spent 6 months bartending, the following 6 months as a public health research assistant, doing like field work. And then anything else relevant? I took the MCAT once in August, first week of August of 2020, which was also the abbreviated version in person. Yeah, and I'm a social science MD PhD applicant. So if you have any questions specifically about that, like extreme niche, feel free to talk to me. And I'll pass it off to the last. Oh, there's 2 more. Corinne, I'll pass it off to you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Corinne. I'm currently in MS2 in the UCLA Drew program. I was born and raised in San Diego and went to UCLA for undergrad. And then I took 3 gap years. So if you need, have any questions about taking multiple gap years, I'm more than happy to answer those. I ended up taking my MCAT. I took it once, just before the pandemic hit. So I took the long form test. And yeah, I'm currently on rotations, hence the scrubs. And I will pass it off to Ryan.
Thanks. Hi everyone. I'm Ryan Shi. I'm a PhD 2 in the ND PhD program. I use he, him, his pronouns. I took the MCAT twice, and both times were before COVID, so I'm kind of a dinosaur in this respect. But I'm happy to provide little 2 cents bits on what went wrong the first time and how to turn it around for the second time. I'm not sure if Matt wants to introduce himself or not, but Matt will be sort of moderating the chat and Q&A. So Matt, would you like to do a brief intro at all?
Yeah, of course. My name's Matt. I'm a first year at the Geffen School of Medicine. I went to the Boston College for undergrad, took 1 gap year, and like Eugene and Jen, I also took the abbreviated MCAT test back in 2021, and I'm going to be the Q&A moderator, so I'll be answering your questions in chat today.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, so we have sort of some planned questions that we're going to go through, and we're also going to have a Q&A sort of opened up at the very end. So if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A. Matt will be responding to them as we go. If there are any that Matt feels like could be really fruitful for a lot of like a panel discussion, we'll save that towards the end. So do put your questions there, but hopefully we'll get into some of them as well. So first up, it's all about resources. So, you can look online and find tons and tons of resources, whether it's the personal classes that have tutoring, whether it's different book sets, whether it's Anki cards or other flashcards or UWorld. So maybe just a brief rundown for each of you. What resource or resources did you use, and how effective did you find them in your study preparations? I'll just sort of leave it open for it.
No, I guess I'll just start because I know some people took it a lot sooner, so they can add on as it goes on. But I think it was pretty standard during my time, like to take like a course. So I did take a Kaplan course. A lot of your schools might have like those vouchers that kind of help you get a course kind of more inexpensively. So I kind of got that from my institution. And so I took a Kaplan course, kind of stuck to it, went over those books. But to be quite honest, those courses are kind of like hit or miss for most people. And so the course like came and went, and I felt like I wasn't really that prepared after doing the course. And I just realized that either it goes too fast or it goes like too slow. Everyone's going to be kind of different with that kind of a standardized curriculum. So what was most valuable to me at that point was having the books, the videos, actually being able to go through it myself. That's probably what I would like recommend to everyone, that you could probably try like a self-paced course. It doesn't have to be a live in person. I know a lot of us feel like we can get on track and stuff, but don't feel bad if you finish the course and you feel like, wow, I didn't really get as much as I wanted out of this, and I need more time to prepare, because you have to set your own timeline. Don't let other people set your timeline for you. I'm sure you've noticed a lot of us took gap years. Maybe the MCAT was one of those reasons. So like it was for me, I felt like I needed, while doing coursework, I couldn't really give full justice to the Kaplan course. So I used that, and I felt I was kind of limited by Kaplan in a sense. And so I tried to get tests from a lot of different sources. So used some different books, some different tests. I think in this process, your best friend is really going to be just taking lots of exams and practicing and learning from those. So even though I had Kaplan, I tried to get some Princeton review exams. I know Blueprint is really popular now. It wasn't so much back in my day. But yeah, so try to get a lot of exams from a lot of different sources. Definitely still use the AMC, but don't go so far into trying to use everything. That's also another danger. So if you have books, I really tried to make sure that I knew the books from Kaplan really well and tried to spread out more in the exam area, rather than trying to get some books from exam crackers, some books from Blueprint, some from Kaplan, and try to spread myself out too much to the point that it can be really exhausting, and you can feel that, oh, I'm not really getting anything out of these resources if I have so many of them. So that's just from the get-go, letting you know to stick to the resources you have and make sure you know them well first before trying to do a bunch of different things. Yeah. And yeah, I guess if Eugene and Jen want to add, and then we can go down the same order.
Yeah, I would say like I guess like there's so many things to talk about like for preparing for like MCAT because like so many people study in like different ways and prepare in different ways. But at least like just focusing on like resources specifically that I use. I started with Kaplan. The most recent one I just bought like new ones. A lot of people buy old ones though, like reused in like Facebook like marketplace, I guess. But I wanted to like take a lot of notes. So I just bought new ones. And I studied like for the summer break, like for like the entire 3 months. And when I finished with like content review or like I didn't use the PS for Kaplan. I used like the 300-page, I forgot what it was. It was like on Reddit.
Mile down.
Mile down was it? Or like Reddit, like 300-page like I'm blanking out on the name, but if I'm gonna find it. So I use that for like the content review. And then I supplemented like I guess like after I was like kind of confident with content, I started like UWorld, I think. And UWorld like figures are really good. Like they were like lifesavers. Like for me, like all the like the kidney stuff and like all the figures and like diagrams, like those are really, really helpful. So I think like personally that was a really good investment. So I highly recommend that for UWorld. And I also used Anki. So I used Mile Down Anki card deck, and I think I use that like pretty like regularly. Like you have to stay on a schedule if you're gonna use Anki, so like you have to be pretty like diligent about it. So I use that as one of my resources. Yeah, if I can think of anything else, I can also add, but I'll let other people speak first.
Yeah. And then oh, sorry. I'll
Oh,
just
go ahead.
I'll just go quickly. So I wanted to use Kaplan and I had the books, but my problem was that it was right at the beginning of COVID, like that February, March. So I left all my books at school, flew home, and then was like, okay, once I realized that I wasn't coming back to campus and for like a year, I was like, I have to just make do. And I think it actually worked out really well. Like I wanted to minimize cost of studying for the MCAT because it can like really, really add up just being pre-med, applying to med school. So the way I did that was all of my content review was through Khan Academy. And if, again, it goes back to what Eugene was saying about what kind of learner you are, it worked out that I'm a very visual learner. So those videos were fine for me. But I did all of my content review with Khan Academy. And then I did Anki pretty early on too, just based on advice. And I would like unsuspend the topics that correlated to what Khan Academy videos I watched that day. For example, if it was about the kidneys or if it was like a chem topic, I would just do those. And I think that really helped because I feel like after content review, it can be easy to be like overwhelmed and then forget stuff. But after I did content review for like half the summer, the next half of the summer, I started with practice tests. I used Blueprint and shared an account with a friend also to save money. And then that friend also had the fee waiver for the AAMC like gold standard tests, like the test bank. So he let me use his account too. And like, honestly, it worked out really well. If you're like close to someone like that, you can just use their login and it's fine. But yeah, my main goal was to save money and do well. And I think using let's see I started with Khan Academy, moved on to Blueprint, which was an account I shared, and I also started UWorld because I wanted extra questions. So, but definitely share resources with friends if you're able to.
And yeah, just jumping back into what I was saying about the psych soc, what I found really helpful was like the Khan Academy summary. I think they have a 100-page summary sheet as well. I think Matt put in the chat too, kind of adding to the resources. So I only used that and didn't even open like Kaplan psych soc, I think. I think that was pretty comprehensive, and just like knowing all the like buzzwords and like the main like details, like kind of associating, like there's a lot to memorize for psych social, and I think that was really useful.
I do kind of want to hammer a certain, in my opinion, like a lot of things, like the information from each resource is pretty much the same because the information on the test is the same. So you spend a lot of time sort of getting to know yourself as a learner and figure out the voice of which questions banks or books speak to you. I use Exam Crackers and Kaplan books and Khan Academy videos. But I think the AAMC material was by far the most helpful because they write the test. And that's how, like, the passages are, even though the content's the same, passages from practice tests from place to place varies quite a bit in like, it's very hard to describe, but like the way something is written, way information is presented varies a lot. And the AAMC presents it in the exact way it will be on the test. So I think you should treat that as as like your primary source, regardless of whether that's how you take in information. That should be how you evaluate yourself and your progress. That's my opinion. And I sort of designed my studying around the AAMC full length tests. Like I took one at the beginning and then a couple in the middle and then one right before the week before the exam. And that was sort of a way I measured how I was doing. And then in between I used third-party resources mixed in.
Yeah, just to kind of like echo what everyone else has said, like definitely find the resources that work best for you. For me personally, I used the Kaplan books. They are pricey though, so if you feel like you can afford them, definitely like getting the older copies, like Eugene said, is really helpful. I was lucky enough, I did one of the summer programs at UCLA called PrEP. So it's for students that are like socioeconomically disadvantaged. If there are like different programs across the country that do offer those resources for free for the students that do those programs. So if you are planning on taking a little bit more time or you have a little bit more time before you apply, I would highly recommend doing one of those programs because they really help with obtaining resources and also just kind of like study tips in general. And then to echo what Jen said, sharing resources, I shared a Next Step account with a couple of my friends to just do extra practice tests that I felt like I just needed to get a little bit more practice in before I actually took the MCAT. And
Great. Awesome discussion. Yeah, so I think probably a very common denominator from all of these points has been that it's going to be an individual process for each person taking the exam, and part of the initial studying is going to involve trying to find the resources that are going to work well with your style and how you assimilate information. So, don't be afraid to diversify and try different ones. But, as Sayan is starting out with saying is, you don't want to pick 10 and try to do all 10 to completion. You will probably get more out of it if you just focus on a couple and know them really, really well. I'll also echo Ben's point. For me, I also oriented every single part of my studying the second time around the exams themselves, because I recognized that the first time I was so focused on content review, thinking I had to memorize everything, know everything. And when the test came around, I wasn't able to synthesize in real time when I was reading the passages. So, it's good to have your foundations, but half of the battle is going to be synthesizing information in real time under the stress of the exam. So I think for me, I found equal parts practice and studying content review was the key to success. I do want to move on to the next section, but I also want to acknowledge that a couple of the questions that have come in are from people that are taking the exam maybe in the next couple of weeks or so. So I think what we'll try to do is structure our questions in a way that it helps people who are thinking about taking it maybe farther out, and then also those who are taking it in the near future. And so I guess tackling that from both ends, the next question is going to deal with the scheduling in terms of, how, when you're sort of at the macroscopic scale, figuring out how you want to plan everything, how did you go about that process of planning your studying? And then as you went through that process, did you adjust in real time? And then maybe in those last few weeks, what were your focuses? And hopefully that should give some nice breadth.
I guess I'll just start again. Just to keep it short, I guess. Again, like since it was pretty far away when I took my exam, I just remember, like as I mentioned, when I took the course, I knew I wasn't ready. I was in school, and so that's why I decided like I would try to find different opportunities for a gap year. And so I used that extra time to kind of like just prepare as you go on. I know that's kind of hard because that was for me work. It could be something else for you. You like it could be research or something else. And depending on your schedule, it could be hard to fit in like study time. And you could be tired just doing what you're doing for gap year. So I guess you just have to be cognizant of that. Be upfront about it if you do take a gap year for this reason. And if you're doing it while you're doing it in school, I think the easiest thing is just start pretty early if that's what you if you know you want to finish it up in school and you definitely don't want to take a gap year, then start kind of early. Try to go along with your courses while you're studying, and then if it doesn't work out, I guess be patient with yourself, and then you can start thinking about taking gap years or something like that, or like having extra time. I know sometimes people try to stress themselves out and fit it in like one summer, like, oh, I've done 2 years of college, I'm gonna do this in 3 months, and this is my timeline. That's it. I know some of us repeated the exam. I took it only once, but I know ideally you want to feel prepared when you go in, and I guess people can add about this, but certainly no one wants to take it more than once. So if you are in that position, then and you know you're not prepared, why put yourself in there? Maybe like wait a little bit. But again, it also depends. A lot of things happen on exam day, things like that. I know during my time there were people who voided the exam that day for that reason, because obviously timing is a very big issue too. So if you find yourself that you need to void or retake it, definitely it's not the end of the world, but preparing and giving yourself enough time and not setting deadlines for yourself based on outside factors is, I think, a good strategy.
I guess we'll go by the last order. So for my scheduling, so I think I mentioned I studied for like 3 months. And it was a nice like period to study for me, especially because like COVID, it was a COVID year, like 2020. So it was like I could literally do like not do like anything else. Like I couldn't go out, like I couldn't do anything. So like it was a perfect time to literally just like kind of isolate myself and like just study. I know that sounds pretty depressing, but I did have family around me, and we ate together and I went like walking outside, so it wasn't that depressing. But in terms of like scheduling, I would say like I try to do a lot of like content. I try to like finish content review like as soon as possible, because like as like Ben and like everyone else mentioned, it's really important to like get into the questions like very quickly, in my opinion. So like I would do like content review like very like don't get like stuck in like real like a specific concept and like just kind of move on. Like I think you'll kind of get the hang of it once you do like questions. And then most importantly, I think like I kept doing Anki, especially like after I did like kind of my brief like brush up on like the content review, and then like supplementing with UWorld. And then for the last month for me, I spaced out the AMC like full length exams. Like there are 4 of them, I think. I don't know if there's still 4, but for me, I try to space it out. Like if I took it like this Saturday, I would do it like for like one exam per week, basically. So like I would do the last one, like the first one, like the first Saturday, second Saturday, third Saturday, fourth Saturday, leading up to the 5th Saturday, which is my actual MCAT exam. So I did that, and what helped for me was I made an Anki deck of the AMC full length like questions, like kind of like by the sections. I don't know if that works for everyone, but it worked for me at least. And then I think someone asked about like what I did like for the last week of like preparing for the actual exam. I like went over like all my Anki cards for AMC like full lengths like that I like got wrong. Like I screenshotted them and then I like wrote my own explanations on like how it made sense in my head and in my mind. So I think going over that is like really important for the last like couple weeks, especially because I think AMC like full length material is like very high yield. So I think I would focus on that.
Yeah, and then, sorry, then, just to add it very quickly, I did the same thing with like spacing out my AMC test. I think, yeah, I mentioned it earlier, but I spent like probably a month-ish on content reviews and then starting Anki then too. And then with like a month and a half, 2 months, starting with like practice problems with UWorld and then the AMC test. And I think the big game changer for me in the last like 3 weeks was like going over my AMC test in detail. And I actually made a chart of like why I got questions wrong, because there are different reasons you can get them wrong. One, you have a gap in your knowledge. Two, you don't, like me, you don't know how to do math, and like exponents are just like so confusing. And then three, like maybe you ran out of time. Like there are a lot of reasons why you can get questions wrong. So I like wanted to pinpoint my weaknesses by putting it in a spreadsheet. And I think by doing that and like acknowledging what I was bad at was really helpful in the past 2 weeks. So like I knew that I was short on time, so I made like a timetable to keep myself on track during the actual exam. I knew that I didn't know how to do exponents, so like I spent that week like making sure I wasn't going to make any silly mistakes with math. Little things like that, like writing down exactly what I did wrong, and if I had a gap in my content knowledge, then like watching a Khan Academy video on that again or something.
Yeah. I just want to like say something really quickly for AMC like full length like cars exams especially. So I took like 2 MCATs. And the reason why I retook my MCAT was because I bombed my cars like the first time. It was like so bad. Like it was like I couldn't even apply to some schools because like it was so low. Yeah, it's really embarrassing. But so that's why like I didn't really look over the AMC like full length cars explanations that in detail, because like I was like, I mean, like it's not going to be the same passages, like same questions anyway, like why do I bother kind of. But I think like that was the key like thing that like kind of like a game changer like for my second one. Like I actually went and like went ham like on the cars for like AMC full lengths, and like I literally like had to analyze, like I had to like think in their like heads, you know, like I wanted to know like what they wanted me to think in terms of like reading this passage, reading the questions, like choosing the right answer, because I know a lot of like Blueprint, like all the other like UWorld, like cars, they're all so different. So like I wouldn't focus cars for those. Like I would focus on the AMC cars. Like that's what you need to know. Yeah. So sorry, I feel so passionate about cars because that that was such a scar in my life, but I ended up okay, and you guys will too.
I want to emphasize that the MCAT is like a physical endurance test, that like there happens to also be medical content, but like a key thing to practice is, especially the weekend, like if you're a couple days out from the test, you're probably not going to learn a ton more stuff. You can brush up on stuff you already know, but you should like practice sleeping well. You should practice sitting down for 7 hours and getting up and going to the bathroom only when you have break time. Like that's something I really focused on practicing. The day before the test, I made pastry dough by hand because that's something I really like to do. I know it'll mean I get a good meal and it makes me happy. Like you should like schedule time to make yourself happy, and you should find things. And I like, this is August 2020. I was like reading the news, seeing thousands of people die in this country. I was like in a terrible mental state, but I was like, my agenda now, my studying material is to make myself feel better. And you have to prioritize yourself physically to the same extent that you prioritize the content.
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. It's very important for you to prioritize your mental and emotional well-being while you're studying for the MCAT. My timeline was a little bit different. I was working 2 jobs while I was studying, so timing wise was a little bit harder to find time to study. I worked in an ER, and as I worked at like a martial arts studio, so my jobs were a little bit fluctuant in terms of like the hours that I was awake. So I really had to plan out my study plan. I started about 6 months in advance to just make sure that I had enough time to go over everything. And like there were definitely times where I got behind a lot just because, you know, you get home from work, you're really tired, like you don't really want to study. But I think coming up into like the third and fourth month or third and second month out from the MCAT, I really was like, okay, Corinne, like, you have to buckle down, like just do as much as you can with what time you have. And so I really had to be disciplined in studying like an hour or two a day, which goes a long way if you feel like you don't have the time to like really have a whole study day to yourself. So I would study like before I went to work, like an hour before I went to work, and then an hour when I got home, which was typically like a little bit later in the day. And doing practice questions, like everyone else has said, is really, really important. I think with content, I was so wrapped up in the content the first couple months, and I realized that I wasn't going to get through all of it. So I really focused on getting practice questions done as best as I could and really reviewing them. Like Jen said, you can get questions wrong for different reasons. So really finding out what gaps you're having, whether that's like knowledge or like reading comprehension or not being able to do the math correctly. Those I really had to like go over in the time that I had. And yeah, if you guys have any questions like specifically about like work MCAT balance, definitely let me know.
Great, awesome. Another fruitful discussion. I'll just add a couple 2 cents on top as well. So first time I took the MCAT, I probably studied full time for 2 weeks, which was really stupid. Don't do that. It was mostly because I planned for taking, say, 2 to 3 months, but was so engrossed with my undergrad research and everything else that was going on that I didn't personally like take the appropriate time management and block off time. And it was always, okay, you know, I'll do this chapter tomorrow, and then keep pushing it off. So I think the lesson I learned from that was have built-in buffers when you're making your plan for your schedule. You know, if you think it's going to take you 3 months, maybe multiply it by some factor with some extra like 1.5 and give yourself a little bit extra. Have buffers built in periodically so that when, not if, when you fall behind in content review or anything like that, it's not going to set you back entirely, and you won't feel as if you're just constantly falling behind. So that would be point number 1. Point number 2, it seems like a number of people have taken the same approach of having very comprehensive sort of spreadsheets and analyses for their practice exams, like Jen and Corin were saying. I did the exact same thing. I had a spreadsheet with probably like 30 or so columns in it. Each question was a row. And so I would then go through and not only say, did I get this wrong, but also how confident was I in getting it right or wrong? How many choices was I guessing between? What was the reason I got it wrong? Was it based on the type of question? Because I tended to miss a lot of CARS questions that were asking about the author's perspective. And so if you had gone through sort of a customary analysis, just looking at what did you get wrong, you won't find that information in there. You'll just see, okay, I got it wrong when it asked me to do this. But when you look at not only the content of the question, but the type of question, how the question's asked, that is another dimension of analysis you can do that I don't think a lot of people do in my experience. And so I think that was actually the big jump that allowed me to sort of really make my second test a better one. Yeah, so awesome discussion there. Do you want to slowly pivot into our next sort of category of questions, which is the test day tips? So we talked a little bit about preparing, you know, what resources are at your disposal, how do you schedule your plan, and that kind of thing. But, you know, as time is ticking down, now we're not in prep mode, we're in execute mode. You're in the center taking the tests. How do you sort of navigate that process in terms of what are your objectives, time management? How do you use your scratch paper or whatnot? Do you have scheduled time for your breaks that you built in? How did you spend that? Any bits and pieces you think might be useful?
I feel like just trying to practice exactly what you're going to do on test day, like waking up at that same time, taking the test exactly like you would have taken it if you were there. I know like beforehand, I used to like pause the test before and I was like, oh, I didn't take it as seriously. But when time's winding down, you want to simulate the experience as much as you can. So that's mostly what I would advise is taking the test exactly as you would when you would that day. So I know it won't be exactly the same, but you can keep the timing, the breaks. Maybe I tried even to do the meals, having that scheduled ahead of time. What am I going to eat during that break? And then, but definitely that last week, I know someone had a question similar to this. I really would encourage not taking an exam if you're like, someone was taking the exam, I think on Friday, this Friday, and then I wouldn't take it now. Like I would not take an exam now and try to go over it and do all that. I know it depends on the person, but frankly, if you're going to have that kind of analysis that Ryan was just talking about, that's going to take some time. If you take a test right that week, you might not get through it. Maybe like if you're doing this, let's say a Sunday and you have a test on Friday, maybe that's fine. But I wouldn't do it like on a Tuesday, Wednesday, right before the exam. At that point, I would just go over what you've already done, not try to get any new content or new ideas on the last minute and psych yourself out. So I'll leave it there.
I would say, okay, so I tend to be a really nervous test taker. So like Science said, I wanted to like simulate test conditions as much as possible. And I took a 5 p.m. test, which was just a weird time because in my head, I'm like, when am I going to eat lunch? And like, what about my bowel movements? And I was just like really anxious about a lot of tiny things like that. But I think once I figured out like what time I wanted to eat, and like I brought like so many little snacks, and also like when I was taking my practice test, I like went to the bathroom every single time just because I know I'm a nervous peer and I just wanted to like, just go with the motions of going to the bathroom. Yeah, I don't have much more to add. I think Simon did a great job.
Yeah, I would say I'm assuming there's no more shortened exams anymore, right? There's only the long ones. Okay. So for my long exam, I agree what Cyan has said. Like every week when I like had the full length exam, I literally like did the same things, like wore the same clothes, like, like it's kind of neurotic, but yeah, I wore like the same clothes because like, like you want to be comfortable. You don't want to wear jeans, like you want to wear something like a little bit like, flexible for your waist, all that. I like, and then I had the same snacks like prepared. I ate the same thing just to make sure like have like any like weird like bowel movements or like my stomach doesn't hurt like on test day. So I try to be very comfortable with like having the same things, like the same nuts, like same like oh, milk. Sorry. Yeah. So I remember doing that, and I think that really helped is what I'm trying to say. It really helps you like be in a very comfortable position, like in the cubicle, I guess, like for MCAT. Like and have kind of like mimic that like setting too, like on your like desk, like don't have like a lot of things like around like on your like wall, or like I guess I have a space where you're not like distracted by like roommates or like family members if you're living with them. I have like earplugs, like the rubber earplugs, like I ordered them from Amazon, and I like put them on for every full length exams as well. So I tried my best to like kind of mimic as much as possible, like minus like all the check-ins and like ID scanning, like palm scanning stuff. So I try to do a lot of those to like prep for the actual exam. So I think that helped for me. I know it's different for everyone. So yeah.
Oh wait, sorry, I have one more thing to add. I realized like something I didn't realize until until closer to my test day was that they give you like a little plastic paper thing that you can write on. And so for me, there was some physics formulas that I wasn't super confident on. So I just tried to memorize them. And then as soon as I was allowed to write on my notes, like I just wrote them all down so that they were out of my head. I could focus on other stuff. So if you have some things that you're like kind of iffy on and you just want to like write it down, like you're allowed to do that once they let you. Yeah.
To add on that, I actually bought that from Amazon. Like the plastic, like the ones that you can erase and like write like with markers. Like it was the same one, I think. And I think that really helped because like I wasn't like I was like I kind of like use my space like wisely. Like for like chemistry, I'm gonna use like this portion of like the like I guess like the plastic sheet, like and stuff like that. Like I don't know like if that matters super to you, like, or it's like personally important to you, but like for me, like I wanted to like have that kind of organization at least. So I practiced like doing it on markers and plastic sheets.
A piece of advice I would have is try to find a friend who is in a similar situation or has been in a similar situation to commiserate with. This is, I'm sorry to say this, one of the most miserable processes I've ever experienced academically. And try to find someone who's going through it with you, because man, it is tough. And I put my girlfriend through a lot of stress.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely, my best friend and I were taking our MCATs on the same day, just at different places, and it was very helpful to have that person there to commiserate with and, just be able to express how frustrating this whole process is. In regards to test day things, so like Eugene and Jen said, I had a equation sheet that I wrote down like every night, to kind of just like remember the equations in my head. And so on the day of the test, the first thing I did when I was able to sit down and write things down was I wrote down all of my equations so that they were just out of my brain. I didn't have to worry about them. I could just reference them when I needed to. That was super helpful. And then in terms of simulating test conditions, like everyone has said, like it's very important to do your best to try to simulate test conditions. I unfortunately was not very good at that when I was taking my test or when I was doing my practice tests. So if you feel like you struggle with that, like I do, definitely it's not the end of the world. Like it's okay. You just kind of have to like make do with how like how you study, how you handle like test taking anxiety. Definitely take your breaks, I would take my breaks and like make sure that you get back in time, because if you don't like get back within your designated break time, it eats into your next section. So definitely take your breaks, but also make sure you get back on time. During my breaks, I would just do a couple like laps up and down the hall, splash some cold water on my face so that I was like ready to go into the next section. And don't let whatever you think you got wrong in your previous section affect how you're going to do the next one. Because I think oftentimes, like when I was taking practice tests, I'd be like, oh, like, what was that question I was like supposed to do? Or like, what was that formula? And then I would spend some time thinking about that and not focusing on like what was in front of me. So do your very best to really just focus on what that next thing is going to be. Because like once you've submitted it, it's done. You just got to keep going.
Awesome. All excellent advice. And just to, I guess, give some tangible bits to that, so what Corin just said. So I did the same and also recommend the same to all the pre-medical students that I mentor, in that, when the MCAT itself has multiple sections and there's often a break in between sections. Sometimes you can choose to bypass the break and just power through. Up to you and whether you think that's matches well with your style. But for me, in between each section, I would sort of purge my mind of everything that had just happened and then remind myself of like some really basic but fundamental facts about the next section that I was going to encounter. So if I knew I was going into like a physics heavy section, then VF equals VI plus AT, like automatically. VF squared equals VI squared plus 2AD. I still remember those for some reason. But you just remember certain things, and not only does it help sort of prime your minds for this next section, but it also sort of builds confidence, because you're remembering things that and it really just sets you up, in my opinion, for the best chance of success. So I'd highly recommend the in-between section, purge from the previous one, enter the mindset of the new one. It's really going to set you up. I guess in the subject of neuroticism that Eugene was talking about, I had similar things. So I went to my exact testing facility the day prior. I sat down on the floor with the kids scheduled to take it that day, the day prior to mine. I waited until the administrator called them all in, stood up with those kids, and only at the very last minute sort of shimmied off to the side. And so I did all of that to get a sense of like, okay, what is the sign-in process going to be like? Is it going to be better to be in the front of the line or the back of the line, middle line? Who knows? Is there a weird air conditioner draft that I can see when I peek through the door or whatnot? I also, after those people went in to take their exam, I timed how long it would take for me to walk from the testing site to the restroom, the closest restroom, and back again. So I knew exactly how long, at least in commute, it would take. So if you're gonna have to go through a security sign process when you are coming into the room, every time like they check your glasses, if you're wearing glasses, they'll I guess do like a little wand check and stuff just to make sure you're not bringing in materials. But that takes time, and so I wanted to have the best estimate of how much wiggle room I have for snacks or whatever else. So definitely was part of the neuroticism there as well. Awesome stuff. I guess a related question I want to pose next is Morris. I think we talked a little bit about managing sort of like simulating the appropriate conditions and whatnot, but now let's dive into the test day itself. You're in the test, and I'm guessing I can say with probably 100% confidence we all felt this. You're in the test, you have no idea what the question is asking you, you feel the time is ticking down, and you feel stressed as heck. In that moment, what are your strategies to sort of pause and regroup?
So for me, like I mentioned before, the reason I talked about voiding before is that's kind of what I had in my mindset. It's like, what do I have to lose kind of approach, that if I feel like I'm not finishing this up, then I can void it at the end. I was just kind of using that as like a support for myself in a way. And then just moving on to the next question. Just remember, all these questions are the same points. There's no point to like sticking on this one question that you're stuck on. You can come back to it later if you need to. But definitely, I would want to reiterate that if you know that you were, let's say you did do that mistake, you were waiting for a long time on this one question, you didn't answer a lot of questions, but the section is over. Then you kind of have an indication that if you didn't even put an answer, that you probably won't get the score that you want. You have half the section left. That there's no shame in voiding the exam then, if you already know that you didn't answer all these questions. But if you are stuck on a question, definitely try to move on. I know it seems like mentally you're like, oh no, every question counts. The next question might be hard too, but the best approach is just to try to move on. And I think even simulating that, when you take a lot of practice tests, you'll get the hang of it. You'll know if, this question is going to take me too much time, or it's too difficult, or I just didn't study it. If you take a lot of exams, you'll figure that out when you practice beforehand.
Yeah, I definitely felt this a lot. I think my strategy was just to flag the question, and it's definitely easier than said, like Sion said, like to flag it, or like, I flagged it and was just like moving on to the next question. I did this a lot in chem and also for cars. I think it's really easy to get bogged down by the question and then think about it and reflect on it. But like what Ryan said earlier, it's kind of a skill to like just purge information, be like, okay, next question is independent of the one that was previously hard. So yeah, during practice exams, like I got in the habit of like, I really liked highlighting things in the question stem and also flagging questions. So that's something else you can get in the habit of if you'd like. But yeah, flagging questions, coming back to them at the end, and
yeah, I would second that. I am a big fan of like flagging questions. I am like for me, like my type is like kind of go over like the questions like carefully, but also like quickly as possible, so that I have enough time for a second review, even for the questions I didn't flag. For me, like it feels safe, like I guess like to go back to the question and like, okay, I know like 100%, but like, do I know like 200% sure like I'm like good for this one, right? So I like doing that for all my practice exams and also like for the actual exam. So I would say like refrain from like flagging like too many, like over like 50% of questions. Like I feel like that's not a really good strategy, but I feel like for the ones that you didn't even flag, like you should also review those. But yeah, like Jen mentioned, like flagging questions, and you can always come back and be mindful of the time always. Like you should also be like very cognizant of like the time, but don't get like too like worried too much, I guess, but just like keep that in mind. But just flag it, and then like the next question will be like easier or harder. You never know, but I think moving on from the question that you think is difficult is really important. Like don't get stuck.
Yeah, in medical school, we've had now 2 exams. I flagged about 1 out of 3 questions during the exams. So like, screw it, I'll do this later is a good skill to have in medical school. And I passed both those exams. Oh, I would say someone asked in the Q&A, this sort of relates about biochemistry. Like sometimes like, and I think in psych and soc, this is a relevant skill, is like, if you don't get anything from a passage, find like 1 or 2 words you know, and think of like, what's something I know about this? Because oftentimes there will be like a keyword, and then like the same passage 3 questions later will have like, by the way, what does this mean? So like try to anchor on like the couple things you know, and maybe try to expand on in your head, like what's related to this, what's something I could know, what's something they might ask me about this, what should I be ready for? That's sort of a strategy, especially psych and soc, where it's like if the word, what's that guy's name? Erickson. If the word Erickson is mentioned, you should be ready to have the stages, that sort of thing, even if you don't have the first question ready. And then you should, after the MCAT, eliminate that from your brain, because that is information that harms you if it's in your brain, because it's so stupid. But that's a separate panel.
Yeah, I definitely think flagging is very important. I am with their, like what Ben said, on a lot of our tests in med school, at least I've flagged at least half of my questions on almost every single test. Luckily I've passed them all, but yeah, it's very important to, like figure out like what you have time to go back to, and like, it's okay to be unsure of things. That's totally fine. I think in specifically relation to cars, I know Matthew is typing an answer to timing. This is a cars kind of timing thing that I used to use. So I'm a pretty slow reader. At the start of studying for the MCAT, it would take me like 8 minutes to read the passage, and then I'd only have like 2 minutes to answer the questions. It's about 10 minutes a passage. So I really had to focus on like my reading and like concentrating on the passages that are in front of me, because oftentimes I would like zone out, or I would, like I would read something and then I like wouldn't comprehend any of it. So I would actively take notes during those passages that I feel like are a little bit denser, just so that my brain is kind of like thinking while I'm reading. And I would try to do a good medium for me was like 6 minutes to read the passage and 4 minutes to answer the questions. For cars specifically, that's kind of how I would keep myself within a 9 to 10 minute window. And then if I had extra time at the end, I could go back and be like, okay, like what are some things that I can answer really quickly just by like skimming through like the notes that I wrote or the passage. That doesn't work with everything, and it doesn't work for everyone. So, like if you find a strategy that works for you in terms of like questions to passage reading, definitely like stick with that throughout your test.
Great. So I'll just add, I guess, a different flavor of advice. I think there's been a lot of discussion on, what are some tangible things you can do with the flagging and all that, which is all really good stuff, and I highly recommend it. On the personal sort of internal mental state side of things, I think a really important thing is to be aware of what your deer in the headlight response is. And so what I mean by that is, you're reading a question, you're just like, what? You be aware of what your typical response is and how you can subvert that cycle from sort of just spiraling out of control. So for example, for me, my deer in the headlight response is to just reread the question endlessly in the hopes that I'll glean some nugget of insight, or a word will trigger a memory or something. And 99% of the time, it doesn't work that way. And so if you have a really keen idea of what your deer in the headlight response is and build an active mechanism to subvert it from cycling through, then you can stop it in its tracks and then, adopt a sort of more constructive approach to the question, whether it's, flagging and moving on, or going back to the passage rather than rereading question and answer choices, whatever it may be. So just, you can tackle this exam from so many different angles, both on, the content review on the study side, but also internally, how you structure your approaches and mentality. All of that is going to factor into your success.
Wait, I just want to quickly add one thing. One other strategy that worked for me was striking out like the answer choices that like didn't seem right. Like I immediately knew like kind of like 95%, like I don't think this is like A is it. So I think that's really helpful when you like go back and review it too, because now you only have to look at like 2 like answer choices versus like all 4, and like in cars, like I know there are a lot of like like what would the author like think about this quote, like, and then like have like yes, yes, like no, no. So you can like kind of automatically eliminate like 50%, like just by knowing like yes, yes, like no, no, I guess. So that's a good strategy that I use. I love like striking out like answer choices, like even in like med school, like tests as well. So that's a good like skill to kind of keep doing.
Great. So we're approaching.
Can
Oh, yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a niche tip that might not be helpful to anyone, but if you're still an undergrad and have semesters ahead of you, take an English class or a history class or a philosophy class. It will help you and it will be interesting and you will be a better doctor. And cars is really hard to learn how to do if that's the first time you've done that sort of thing. So if you've taken an English class, you will have at least experience of this sort of thinking. Or history. I didn't take any English in college. I took history, but I would recommend that.
I would just add, I think that's definitely very helpful advice. And then also like just for all the sections, maybe if you have a chance, take a glance at least at the questions before starting reading the passage so that you know what you're looking for. That always helped me a little bit. I know it might not work for everyone, but kind of having an idea what the questions are asking for or looking for, even if you don't read the question all the way through, you kind of can scan the passage and maybe save time and be like, oh, I saw this kind of keyword in one of the questions. So that may or may not help like everyone, but it worked for me. So
Awesome. Thank you. So we are approaching the hour for the panel. So I know we have been having some questions coming into the Q&A, and thank you, Matt, so much for answering a lot of those. We'll keep it open for any sort of last minute questions trickling in, but as that sort of goes forward, maybe each of you, could you give maybe one nugget of either motivational encouragement or something you learned about yourself or something, just, you know, last parting thoughts before we cover some last Q&A?
I can start real quick. The MCAT is important, but it is not everything. As you know, like your entire application is what people are going to look at. And like, yes, this is a part of it, but like, don't like stress yourself out to the point where this is like some daunting thing that you feel like you can't get over. Because you will be able to get through it, and you know, you will, with everything else in your life, you will be able to get into, you know, the school or profession that you want to get into. And yeah, like I feel like before I took the MCAT, I was like, there's no way I can like do this. I didn't do as well in college. So I was pretty like scared about taking the MCAT because I didn't feel like my science background is very strong. But, you know, I'm here now and I'm an MS2. So, you know, it's not the end of the world. You know, it's perfectly normal to like take the test multiple times, as you can see by our panelists here. And it's not everything. That is my one parting advice.
I'll emphasize that point. No one is a better doctor because they did well in the MCAT. Maybe there's a reverse correlation. The problem is that the med school application process like really sucks and it's really long. And at least speaking to my experience, the MCAT was probably the worst part, but there was still plenty of tough parts ahead. And you really got to learn how to give yourself grace and learn how to prioritize yourself. I can't really say I did a very good job at that, so I want to take my own advice. But this is a tough point in my life, and this is very tough. And I like came out great. Like I had a very successful result. I still felt terrible for most of it. But I mean, I had plenty of friends. I tried to take care of myself as well as I could. I think I had another point, but I can't really remember. You can all do it, and the MCAT is the most objective measure of an applicant, but it is probably the least predictive. In that it's the number you know, it's the number you have, it's the number everyone has. So that's the one you compare yourself to other people with. That's not an accurate data comparison, because it's a single factor that is factored much less than other things, right? And so you're going to feel compelled once you have a score, or if you have a target score, to compare, to immediately compare. And I did all this to compare to people you know, and to compare to the schools you want to get in as averages. Try as hard as you can to avoid consuming yourself with that. I'm sure you'll do that, but try to at least acknowledge who you are as a person and as an applicant, and why someone would want you, rather than for all the points you are behind 528. I try not to tell my actual score to people, because it's sort of dehumanizing almost to myself. So that's what and also try to avoid Reddit. I mean, Reddit has great resources, but a Redditor's opinion is never a good thing. As someone who has a Reddit.
Only go there to find the 100-page Khan Academy PS doc, please. Yeah, and try to, or I guess it's for the application cycle, but stay out of like SDN as well. Like once you get like interviews and onward. For me, I would echo what Corinne said as well. I know like it might seem cliche, like MCAT is not like everything, but it really isn't. I really want to emphasize that because I took MCAT twice. And I disclose this to like not like I don't want to embarrass myself, but like I think it's really important for everyone to know. My second MCAT was actually lower than my first one, even though my cars went up, like all the like other sections, like I got kind of like lost on, like it wasn't as solidified as my first one, right? So with that being said, like I was very, very nervous for the med school cycle in general. Like I was like, should I even apply? Like, should I even like take the exam again? Like, what should I do, you know? So I think like last year was like the peak like stress time. Like it was very, very like hard for me personally because of MCAT. Like I think that's like a big emphasis I want to put. Like I still got like multiple interviews, like multiple acceptances, and UCLA still saw my like shitty like car score and they still took me, you know, even though it improved second time. You know, so I really want to emphasize that, like, do not get discouraged because of a bad MCAT score and also a second like worse like score even. It's not the end of the world, seriously, like, and your application, like I'm sure it's like very, very good. So I really want to emphasize that and like share that story.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that, like I've been saying all throughout, just be patient with yourself, set your own timeline, your own schedule. I know a lot of people will give you different advice. Your family will want you to do it in a certain timeline. Your advisors might want you to do it in a certain timeline, but you know you best, so be patient. And the MCAT, again, is not the most important thing. It's one part of a whole puzzle. So focus so much on the MCAT that you forget about everything else. You forget about your personality.
Uh-oh. Perhaps technical difficulties. All right. Well, I guess hopefully Zion can hop back on. But in the meantime, I'll just add some 2 cents on top. I don't know that I could say it any more eloquently than my fellow panelists here. But what I like to tell people is that, you know, and this goes beyond just MCAT, but as a pre-medical student, you know, it's going to be very easy and tempting to compare yourself, whether it's against other people or benchmarks that the schools have set or whatever it may be. Older brother, older sister, younger brother, younger sister, father, mother, whatever guardian, you know, it's very easy to compare. And I think it's extremely important to stay just sort of locked into your timeline. Your story is impossible to recapitulate. No other person on this earth could try to be the same person that you are. They could not have the same set of backgrounds, the same set of experiences, anything like that. So because of that, you're not better than anyone else and you're not worse than anyone else. You're different. And what that means is that everything about your process is going to be different and unique to you. So, you know, definitely look at those around you and glean tidbits of advice and insight that you think would be useful. But as you do that, also put it through the filter and lens of your own experiences and what you know about yourself. You will make it happen. You will prevail. You will get into medical school. You know, I think it's entirely gonna happen. I'll kick it back to Cyan. I think you might have gotten cut off there briefly.
Yeah, I got caught off. Sorry, but yeah, Ryan basically summed it up pretty much pretty well for me. So nothing really to add to that. Just that you know yourself best. So and that you all do great. I'm sure of it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you, Matthew, for helping to moderate the Q&A. I do want to really quickly plug before people hop off the one-on-one peer advising that our group does. This is a way for you to connect with current UCLA medical students, ask them personal questions in a one-on-one meeting about your applications, your essays, interview tips, whatever it may be. So you can find links to that on our MedMentors at UCLA website. We also have an email that you can reach out to as well. So definitely, if you have questions or want to get connected, do look into that. But with that, I think we'll maybe end it for today. The recording will be posted on our social media channels if you would like to sort of rewatch something. And just as a final thank you to our attendees for sort of staying with us towards the end, and again to our panelists, both sort of speaking and moderating in the chat for your valuable time and insights. So with that, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Monday, and looking forward to seeing you on a future panel. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.